So there's two main components that are required for you to create a successful backpacking trip. One is you gotta have a good trip plan. Then you also have to have a second thing, which is all the gear that you take with you. Everything that you put into your pack becomes part of making a trip successful. And you may think that, well, I take some of these gear items and I never use them. But I want to talk about three important pieces of gear that you may never use on a backpacking trip, but when you do have to use them, you're going to be really glad that you have them. First item we're going to talk about that probably seems like an absolute no-brainer, but that is a first aid kit. If you are not carrying a first aid kit on your backpacking trips, you're definitely skimping out on the ability to take care of freak situations that happen when you're out in the backcountry. Even today, out on a hike with my kids, I had to use the tweezers in my first aid kit here to help get a cactus thorn out of my daughter's foot. And had I not had this with me, even on a super short hike, that would have been a huge bummer to not be able to take care of that for her. So while it might seem that over a period of time, I go out on a backpacking trip and I never get a cut, I never get hurt. And so I don't need to have a robust, fancy first aid kit with me, maybe just a couple Band-Aids, some ibuprofen, and some duct tape. To me, that is not a first aid kit. You need something that is actually going to allow you to take care of situations that require actual first aid. And so I've got two different types of first aid kits here. This is the one that I carry most often that has blister stuff. It's got everything in here to take care of lacerations and burns and cuts and just all sorts of different kinds of things that would happen when I'm out on a backpacking trip. But most often something like this Adventure Medical Kit's really simple, basic first aid kit will be enough for one person to take care of the things that typically happen when you're out on a trip. So my recommendation is to make sure that you've always got a first aid kit that is built to handle what you are going to potentially experience in the environment that you are spending time in and matches the level of training that you have for your first aid. As a wilderness first responder, I feel it is my duty to carry a first aid kit that matches my level of training as a wilderness first responder. Somebody that is just basic knowledge first aid and you need to take care of simple first aid things, then something like this will do the job just fine. The next item on the list here is something that I've talked about many times here on the channel, but that is the Zoleo satellite communicator. But satellite communication devices in general are pieces of gear that I feel like, because of their availability and the technology that they provide now, it feels like something that is really important to have out on your backcountry adventures. And the reason for that is they are pretty inexpensive and they allow for easy communication to friends and family back at home to update on what's happening with your trip, to give status for getting to camp, that you're safe, that things are going well, or in the event of an emergency that things are not going well and you need help with a situation. It's something that you don't ever want to have to use, but when you do need to use the SOS function of a satellite communication device, you've got something that is going to allow for you to get help when you absolutely need it. But a satellite communicator, so important. Is it absolutely necessary for your trips? No, you do not have to have this in the same way that you need a tent and a sleeping bag and a stove and those kinds of things, but they're so helpful, and I highly recommend checking out a satellite communication device. I love the Zoleo personally, but these are great to have because they add a lot of peace of mind to you as the hiker, but also to folks at home that care and love you while you go out on your trips to make sure that you're safe. Now, last but definitely not least is navigation tools that are super important for you to have when you go out into the backcountry. Now, I'm somebody of the opinion that feels like a compass and a paper map are not always necessary for when you go out on a trip. There are situations where having those things are super important. But with the way that technology is now, using the navigation tools on your phone and the GPS built into your phone and on a watch are things that you can rely on. they absolutely can fail. I'm not even going to joke around about the fact that electronic devices are things that can fail. But what's the point of carrying a paper map and a compass if you don't even know how to use it? And I would argue that the vast majority of people could not tell you how to triangulate their location on a map and finding coordinates and everything to be able to say, this is exactly where I'm at. And so using an electronic device like a phone as a navigational tool is something that is super helpful and makes it possible for you to properly navigate in the backcountry. And in a lot of cases, you may not ever use those navigational tools because you've got a very well defined trail that you're walking on, but being able to download those maps offline ahead of time, put your route that you mapped into your phone and know exactly where you're at with the built-in GPS. You're gonna be super glad you have those things if you take the time ahead of time in your trip planning to make sure that you've got everything set and ready to go. Now, a couple of my favorite apps to use are CalTopo as well as the Topo Maps Plus app, which makes mapping and planning your routes super easy. I love to use CalTopo on my computer and then export those GPX files to my phone and have all of that so I can have all those waypoints and things planned ahead of time and on my phone so I can know exactly what I'm planning for. But those are 3 super important pieces of gear that maybe you don't use often or you don't think are as important as other pieces that you take with you, but they are very, very important to have. And thank you guys for watching today. Subscribe to the channel if you're not. Hope you have an awesome day. See you on the next one.